Alrighty, so let's get started. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first webinar in our eBiz Sneak Peek series. Welcome to How to Optimize Your Data with Idea Fusion, presented by Josh Given, Idea's Integration and Professional Services Manager. Josh has been with Idea for 11 years and has extensive IT experience, including data center management, system administration, and telecommunications infrastructure. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can type them into the Q&A and we will be answering them after the presentation. There will also be a brief survey at the completion of the webinar that we'd appreciate everyone complete for us to get your feedback. So take it away, Josh.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. And as Eliana mentioned, we're going to be discussing Fusion, Idea Fusion, and how it can help you with your day-to-day management of your data. One of the very first things we need to answer, obviously, for a lot of you is what is Fusion? So with that, let's take a look at a couple things. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of slides here today. We're actually going to go through a quick set and then we'll actually get into a little bit of demo so you can actually see Fusion and what you might be able to do with it. Fusion is a instance of SQL Server that we host in our environment. It is an instance that is solely owned by you. So when we set up Fusion for you, you're the only customer that will be on that instance. So it's just your authorized data within Idea Connector. That data is updated nightly. So anything that's changed in Connector over the course of the day, in the middle of the night, that'll get pushed over into your Fusion account, any of the data that you're authorized for. And it's a full database. It is SQL Server, so you can actually connect to it with other ODBC capable clients or ODBC capable applications, ERP platforms, PIM systems, what have you. And one important key thing is you own the database. So you have the ability to not only pull connector data that you're authorized for, but also add your own tables, put in some of your own data, mix and match data between connector and other data that you may have. And we'll look at that a little bit more later on. But that's a key feature with Fusion is your ability to not only just bring in data from connector, but also bring in data from other systems that you may want to marry up to the connector data. A couple things that Fusion is not, because a lot of people ask this question sometimes. Fusion is not a PIM or an MDM. Some of the stuff you're going to see here will make you think that, but it's important to understand that Fusion is a SQL Server database that is pre-populated and updated with data. There is no user interface that you can, give to a business user to, apply business rules, things like that around the data. It is a SQL Server database. You interact with it with SQL queries. And we'll look at some of that in a little bit, and we'll show you some things. We can help you with the queries. When we initially set you up, we'll do some training, and we will implement a solution for you to get you started. So we don't just throw a database at you. You'll actually understand what the data structure is, how it works, and we'll see that here in a little bit. Fusion is not intended to plug in your web storefront, for instance. So when an end user goes and clicks on a catalog number, it reaches out to Fusion for data. It's not hosted with that concept in mind. It's intended for you to use internally. So you would pull data out of it and put in your web storefront, or pull data out of it and put in your ERP or PIM or some other platform. It's not intended to, it's not hosted for the masses to be hitting it constantly. It's more meant for updates on a daily type basis. Did I mention Fusion's a database? It's a SQL database, and I'm going to drive that home over and over again so you get the concept. So where does it fit in a typical environment for a customer? On the distributor side, and we're going to talk both distributor and manufacturer here. Distributor side, Fusion sits between connector and then all your other business systems that you may want to use the data for. So data comes from connector, it's updated nightly into Fusion, and then you have the ability to pull data out of Fusion and push into your ERP. You also have the ability to pull data out of your ERP and put in Fusion if you're trying to marry some data together to send somewhere else. You can pull in your own information. Maybe you've got your own set of attributes or your own product numbers that you want to use with the data. Fusion is where you can bring all that together before you send it to its final destination. That final destination may be your web storefront. It may be Excel spreadsheets to business users or customers, or other things that you have built, other applications maybe you have built. Maybe you've got a mobile app or something like that. So the data, once it's pulled into Fusion, now you've got the ability to connect all these other applications to it and start pulling that data in and using it. On the manufacturer side, the picture, there's actually two pieces to this. The first is sending your data. Fusion does give you the ability to send data to connector. Right now, you're doing that typically with flat files or XML, EDI. With Fusion, we basically give you two databases. The first database is a database that will let you populate, and we'll let you define the schema for that database. So that way you're populating data the way you're comfortable with it, the way you're used to it, the way you use it every day. You can just update that data, and we will build the connector that pushes that data into Idea Connector. And this, on the other side, you also get the same database that a distributor would get. So you would be able to pull your data out of Fusion in the second database to see how a distributor sees your data in connector. And it also gives you the ability to do some checks where you've now got data both places, and you can make sure, did this data actually make it? Did it not make it? Where did it get lost? Do I need to go into connector and look at load summary reports, things like that? So it gives you a lot of capability to be able to understand, is your data getting across to the distributors or not? And you can automate a lot of that process. So then you're only focused on, okay, what data do I need to work on? We do use some conventions in the database. I just want to cover them really quickly. This is typically stuff we would cover in the training session. But we do have some conventions that we use so that it's very easy to start understanding, what type of data you have. We've got field names that we always start, string data with an S, number data with an N, date data with a V, bit data with a B. So you'll see the field names have that kind of high level data type as part of their name. There are some very common primary keys throughout the entire database that we use, so you can relate the tables together. And these are those primary keys where you've got the actual item ID that's in every table. The public ID is pretty much in every table that identifies the manufacturer. For manufacturers, there's also a end user ID that you would be able to identify distributor. Sorry. Language is a very common part of primary key, obviously, where we've got tables where there's multiple languages. Text type is a very common field where we're identifying what field we're actually storing in that record. And we'll go over that in just a few minutes. Other conventions, multi-value fields. Typically how we handle multi-values, we don't have a separate field in the main table for every single possible value. In that case, we have separate tables, which is what a relational database is all about. So we do have a few, data where we have multi-values. They're in separate tables, and you can see these tables listed here. And when we train you, you'll get a schema diagram that helps you understand the relationships between all the tables. You've got your item table, and all the other tables generally are going to be either linked to that item table through the item ID or through the public ID. So as we go through your training, we'll sit down and we'll show you that. We'll also give you an Excel spreadsheet that maps the idea connector field to the field in the database. So what table and what field is it? And as I mentioned before, we will actually do a project with you where you'll get to understand the database real well, and we walk away with you having it implemented with or integrated with some system. So, and then provide ongoing support. So we're always here to help with queries. If you need help, I'm constantly answering questions about where do I find this? How do I do this? And so forth. So with that, that's a kind of a brief, what is Fusion? And again, if you have questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A, and we will help answer some of those questions. Now, give me 1 second while I switch to my other screen. All right, so the typical way you would interact with Fusion, since it's a SQL database, is through Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. And this is where you get into the nuts and bolts, where you write SQL queries. And again, don't be afraid if you're more of a business user, don't really fully understand SQL, that's fine. We can teach you what you need to know. We can also write a lot of queries for you to help you get going. And we're going to see a couple ways that you could really utilize Fusion as a business user here in a little bit. But the database, this here is a typical Fusion database. You will notice that there's a idea schema, and then there's a DBO schema. The idea schema is the data that we are updating nightly, and you won't be able to write to those tables or update those tables. However, any table you create will be in the DBO schema, and you'll be able to build out as many tables you need, and we'll actually show a little bit of that. The primary table is the item table. That's where all the items are kind of defined. That's where, all your catalog, UPC, brand, a lot of that information is stored. We do have a couple prices, list prices and things in there. So as I was saying, this is SQL Management Studio, and this is what the database structure looks like. The primary table, and I was talking about when I was mentioning the different schemas, this is the idea schema, this is the DBO schema. So we update these tables. You have full control over and can add as many of your own tables as you would like and read and write to them all day long. The primary table is the TB item table, where all the items are defined. So you have your item ID, and this is a unique ID in the database. So it's not the UPC code, it's not the catalog number. It is a pure unique record ID for that item. You can have items in this database with duplicate, with the same UPC code, because you may have a Canadian company and a US company using the same UPCs within connector. So this creates uniqueness across the database and becomes a very important ID across the database. This is where you can actually, though, help, like maybe, okay, you've got duplicate UPCs. I don't want the one from this company. I want the one from this company. That's a perfect example where you can actually create a table to say, here's the list of item IDs I'm going to exclude. And all your queries then would use that table to exclude those item IDs and things like that. So what's the data look like? I just got a simple query here. All I am doing is pulling all the items with a country of origin of China as an example. This actually came up as a question in a sales demo I did, so I decided to add it here since at the time seemed to have been a very hot topic of what products were coming from China. The data that comes across, you see we've got 92,000 products in this particular database. And again, this is a demo database. So it's not got everything in connector. The item table has all your basic information. It's got your dates. This is the status date. It also has your when the last time this item was updated. And this update date is across the entire database, not just this record in the item table. So if something has changed for that item in another table, this date in the item table still gets updated. And what that does is allow you to have the ability to just go to one table and say, okay, show me everything that's updated in a certain period of time. And we're actually going to look at a query that does that in a second. And then now I can act on that data. Maybe I want to drill down into some different additional information. Another simple query here, I'm just searching for a catalog number. And it gives me just that one catalog number. Or you can put in a whole list of catalog numbers if you need to, stuff like that. Again, this isn't a SQL class. I just kind of want to show you the capabilities of the database and how you can start using that data. But this data obviously is not very useful in this format. It's got a lot of information you maybe not need. And so now you can start breaking it down into, okay, I really only need the item ID, manufacturer's ID, the brand, the UPC, just a little bit of information. So now I'm going to pull in I just want this one item, but notice I'm getting that same item multiple times here because I actually went over to the text table, which has all of our textual information like UPC, or URLs, invoice description, and things like that. So I have everything textual that I want to know about this item in this one query, but I've also limited what I'm looking at here. And you say, well, that's great, but that's not going to help me out because what I really need is the image, the spec sheet, and invoice description. not laid out this way, but I want to put it in an Excel spreadsheet, with columns and things like that. So there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. There's 1,000 ways to write SQL statements, but that same exact information can be presented in a column fashion like this. So now you're getting the data. Here's that, again, that one item. Now I've got the UBC catalog number, invoice description, image URL, spec sheet, and then you can start building on that for other information that you might want to tack onto that item. So there's ways to flatten the data out. And I did see a question come across about, is there a way to control the data? I'm going to actually get into that in just a minute here, where we're actually going to show that. One of the things that you're going to want to do with the data is report. You're going to want to find things like, show me all the costs that have changed since yesterday, or since last week, or this is demo data. My data was last updated in August, so I got to go back to July to actually pull some records here. But what I'm doing here is I'm asking for every item where the cost column has changed since July 1st. I should have ran that and then described it, because it's going to take a second here to run. But you see it's bringing over everything. I can't, with this diverse group of people, I can't show the cost column, but I've shown you in the query here. I'm just commenting it out. So you're only seeing list price here, but you get an idea of how you can pull information in, specific information that you need with just some very simple basic statements here. And you can further define that. Maybe you look at this and go, that's great. That's 271,000 records. That's a lot of pricing records. I need some help figuring that out. Well, you can summarize the data, where you can just say, let's see how many updates per brand. And that's kind of useful. So now I can see, I've got some brands where I've got quite a few updates. GE's got 21,000, so now I can hone in on what I want to work on, perhaps, or what brands mean something to me. Then you might start looking at the data, as I was earlier, right before, and going, what brand is that? Who does that belong to? So I decided to throw in the company name into my query. And again, I had to interjoin the company table, the TVCO table. So now I get the same information with the company name. And that may help understand, okay, where is grounding coming from? And I lost grounding. There it is. Thomas and Betts. Now I would look at this and immediately go, and I know some of my coworkers are probably cringing right now. I would look at this and go, Thomas and Betts, do they really have a grounding brand? Let me find those two items, figure out what they are. And the next time I talk to a rep, I'm going to ask them, what's this? Maybe you need to look at your data in Connector. Again, this data is a month or so old, so it could have been fixed by now. But again, you can start to see how you can analyze the data and see where you can go with it. If you're a manufacturer, you can see things like this and go, that probably needs to be taken a look at. And then maybe what you want to do here is say, okay, now I want to focus just on one particular manufacturer or one particular brand. So then you can add that to your where clause, And actually, I want to come up here. I want to say, and NID pub equals this manufacturer ID 10964. And I forgot. Now you're just focused on that manufacturer's information. So there's some other stuff you can do while you're in SQL, and I don't want to bore you with too much technical stuff, but maybe you want the data, maybe you want this information right here. You're not limited to just textual information here. You've also got all the attributes. If I run this query, you can see all the attributes for the same item. You can see the voltage rating, the type, the standard, whatever attributes are available for that particular item. Now maybe you have developed a web app internally that maybe your inside sales use or counter use to look up products. Again, internal apps, you can point to this database. And in that case, you may want to get the data right away in an HTML format that you can use. That all can also be done with SQL, and then can simply be put into your whatever your HTML page is or whatever script you're writing. I'm just going to paste this in, save it. And then if I look at that table, doesn't look pretty, but you've got a nice table there that you can then start formatting, add a little bit of CSS around, and you're good to go. Another example of that would be the same thing with headers, where again, you're just displaying the data in a little box on the screen somewhere. You can, now I've got the same data, I've just added headers, and you can go on and on. The other thing you can do is an unnumbered list or a numbered list, either one, where it's going to create a nice little HTML that you can throw in for an unnumbered list. So there's all kinds of things you can do with SQL as you begin to understand it. And again, we can help you with a lot of that as we work through whatever project you're interested in doing. Now, we talked earlier about business users and how you can engage them with this data. You know, maybe you've got a pricing person that needs access to, for instance, maybe you got a pricing person that needs access to that pricing report that we worked on. As I mentioned earlier, there are other products, ODBC products that can connect with SQL Server, one of them being Excel. This is an Excel spreadsheet that I actually have going through this procedure of connecting to the SQL Server. That same report is available in this Excel spreadsheet. And normally you wouldn't put like a hard-coded date in there. We'd help you write the query so you could say, give me everything from yesterday that changed, or give me everything from last week that changed, you know. So now that business, you can hand this off to a business user who can turn around, open it up, go in here to data, hit refresh all, and you'll notice down here it's running the query in the background. And then it's going to update the data with the current information from that query. I hope. This didn't take this long the first time I did it. What ends up happening here is now you've got, there it goes. Now you've got a spreadsheet that a business user can have access to that has all the information they're looking for the data from Connector. Doesn't have to just be Connector. Again, you can add your own data to this. So maybe and maybe what we want to do is change our query a little bit. I have this demo table that I created here. It's just got 2 fields in it, an ID and a description, where I'm saying, you know what, I want to do a different description for this particular ID. So you can very easily take this query right here, join that table, and this is the e.id. So now maybe I want to pull that description in instead of the connector description. Now I'm going to, so now you see the description is just Josh's, but you see how now you can start marrying data together. And maybe you've got data direct from a manufacturer that you want to marry up with some connector data. Maybe you've developed your own descriptions and you don't want the connector data descriptions to overwrite. Here you can start bringing that stuff together. Maybe you've got your own catalog numbers, whatever it may be. You can build out your own tables here, join to those tables, and then bring that data in. And now this is what gets presented to whatever platform you need to give the data to. So there's a lot of flexibility there. And the same thing applies with any third-party app like Excel. Maybe you want to add your own vendor ID in here somewhere, something like that. Very easily done, having the data pulled together into one place. So, and again, all the business user has to do is they just open up a spreadsheet and hit refresh to run the query and get the latest data. And you're off to the races. With that, I would like to, since we have a little bit of time, open the floor up for questions. You can either, Eliana, I'm thinking we can we open up the audio for people to ask questions directly?
Yeah, so if you'd like to ask a question directly, just raise your hand and I'll unmute you.
Or you can also ask through the question and answer. I am seeing some chats as well. Let me see. Will we be sharing the recording? Yes, we will. Also, you will be getting a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, which at the end of the presentation is a little SQL joins present for you to help you with those of you who are SQL people will find very useful. Is there ERD on how the fields interrelate? Yes, there is. And actually, let me bring that up for you real quick. So just to give you, hopefully everybody can see that. You will get this diagram that shows you where all the tables relate. And this diagram actually connects the field to the field. So the fields that are related are actually connected by the lines, not just lines to boxes here. So you can actually see, what field relates to what in each table. So yes, we do have an ERD. We also have a Excel spreadsheet that will map this field name that you see here to the IDEA connector field name. As far as, Jason, as far as your other question, are any standard queries built? Yes and no. Generally, we are starting to put out some standard queries that I'll make sure the existing Fusion users get updated to. And we're always open to suggestions. If there's things that should be kind of a canned query that should be included, let us know. We've got a ton of queries that we have written over the years. We've been using this database for about 10 years now internally, which is, so we've got quite a few queries. Do you have the ability to create a view? So that would be down here in the database. And yes, again, you are the database owner, so you could create your own views here simply by doing a new view and walking through the process of creating a view. And if you need help with that, you can let us know. I generally don't create views this way. I write a query and create the view that way, but you do have a graphical way to create the view if you wanted to. And what else do we have here? Do we have the ability to link in another SQL server? Yes, we do. That does require a little bit of back and forth between us and you. My recommendation, if it's a SQL server behind your firewall, or it doesn't even have to be a SQL server, it could be another ODBC type server, that we link from your server to our server. Now, there is a little bit of issue with being able to update data on the linked server. So if you're linked over to our server, chances are you want to keep your own data on your server and not put anything on our server, because it becomes a little bit of a challenge trying to update that data that way. We can link to another server. If you've got another server in the cloud, for instance, from this server, you would need our help in doing that. We'd have to actually do it for you, but we can set that up. These are good questions. Any other questions? How about SSIS? So SSIS is a SQL Server information system, I think. Basically where you can develop packages to export data. We are working on that. I don't have that fully fleshed out yet, but we are planning on being able to allow you to do SSIS packages. I want to make sure I set expectations though. The SSIS may come at additional fees. Everybody's putting their stuff on chat instead of the Q&A. Anything else? Today, you do have to go through us to set up additional users. So if you have users, additional users, currently we'll set up, during the implementation process, we'll figure out what users you need and we'll create them for you. That is an idea function at this point. So you have the ability to create tables, views, store procedures, functions, all that kind of stuff in the DBO schema. But since it's hosted on our server, we've got to lock down the security. Any other questions? Yes, I just had a question. Yes, you can create your own tables. That's really what this demo table is. You can build out as many tables as you want. Again, they will show up in the DBO schema. And you will notice in our queries how we can access both the idea schema that we're updating and the DBO schema when we're using our queries. If there are not any other questions, here's a question that I'll kind of ask out to the group, because the question is, has anyone integrated Fusion into their MDM or PIM yet? And the answer is, I know of one that is working on it. I take that back. I do know of one. We do have a large national distributor who has completely integrated Fusion into their Oracle MDM for updating their data. The only other customer I know of that's currently in the process of integrating to the MDM or PIM is the one who asked the question. Anything else? If anyone thinks of any other questions or would rather have a private conversation, we are more than available to set up a another demo call that's more personal. So just get in touch with your account manager, or if you're not sure who that is, Client Solutions can help you get there, and we'll be happy to set something up. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining. And Eliana, is there anything else?
No, but thanks again, everyone, for joining us for our eBiz Sneak Peek series. We'll be back next Wednesday for our next webinar, so be sure to register for that if you haven't done so, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.